Hi folks, I am writing an ebook or iBook, electronic book, and now that I've got one online already and have gotten a little bit comfortable with how to do it, I have three or four books that were on production or being created for some time, and now I'm speeding up with them. So one of them, My Canada, that's the title. I just added another section today about this so-called issues on pseudoscience and targeting of some scientists by the biotech lobbyists and these talking heads and so on. I think I feel it's not important to give too much prominence to these talking heads, but I still decided to add this particular section in the book just to provide some lighter moments and make the reader perhaps have a smile. So this particular section is titled "Targeting Theory" because this is to do with something that happened online where they tried to tarnish Thierry's effort to speak at an event in Houston and the subsequent um exchanges that happened on Facebook by supporters of Thierry who were obviously and understandably upset because of this effort to blackball or negatively paint truth sayer. So here at the left, I have this a few pointers about this section. Talking heads. There was a recent presentation by Thierry Vrain in Houston. The title was "Poison in Our Food Supply." In the real ebook, if you click on that, it should open up the browser and take you to the actual page where where this comment was made about Thierry Vrain pushing pseudoscience and so on. And then if you read on, you will also get to know something about the person who wrote that. His name is Kevin Falta. I had forgotten all about him, but now with this incident, I remember him again. Anyhow, so this is what I wrote in this particular ebook, including my own comments on that thread. I would normally not bother putting up taunting exchanges between pro-biotech and often exceedingly stupid talking heads and myself, rare as these exchanges are. But perhaps this time one can make an exception for a few reasons as follows. First, I am writing this book, Canada Under GMO Attack, or some other title, where I am beefing up section 1 and chapter 2, while chapter 1 and 3 and some others like 4, 5, and 6 are already well advanced. Chapter 2 is dealing with pseudoscience and is lagging. Second, although Thierry Vrain does not need non-scientific help from me to defend himself, I realize that I have a certain kind of flair or a knack in standing up to hollow talking heads, perhaps better than a few others. Third, it likely makes for light reading and produces a smile in the reader. Not everything about biotech science and GMO and pesticide need to be dead serious that makes a person frown or be afraid or disheartened enough to put the book down. So Kevin Falta apparently made a comment somewhere on the web targeting Thierry Vrain. I had heard about Falta but had clean forgotten who or what he was. But that comment apparently generated a long chain of follow-up comments on Facebook, and someone tagged me or drew my attention to it. This is natural since Thierry has a large number of well-wishers in Canada, having crisscrossed its length and breadth, speaking to people about glyphosate and its hazards. I have been accompanying him in many of these travels, having myself spoken on stage after Thierry on some occasions, covering a subject that Thierry does not: activism. So the large number of people who got offended by those unkind words directed by Falta at Thierry made a lot of people concerned on Facebook, and some of who drew my attention to it. Anyhow, here is what I wrote on that website to Falta. Here is a feedback from an engineer and a non-scientist on what I think about this article that claims that claims a former molecular biologist is now engaged in promoting pseudoscience. This is, of course, about Thierry. The article claimed that Thierry was pushing pseudoscience. So, whether science is honest or dishonest is decided by people and not a few folks with a doctor title attached to the name. Was a time when science research was wholly public funded and scientists had a relatively free hand to select what they would research, including bad or good side effects, if any, of emerging technologies. No finding and no research were discriminated against. Chips would fall where they may. Eventually, when enough body of research was available and enough time had passed, a consensus of sorts would form about good and bad points of a technology. That was then. Today, science research is neither public funded nor aimed at public good. It is controlled by the industry for the purpose of creating dividends for shareholders, and industry is not interested in scientists that wish to explore negative side effects of a technology. The industry controls the flow of research and has hijacked what was once free science. It guards its knowledge and actively victimizes anyone that dares to raise alarm about it. Today, anybody that dares to point out what could be dangerous about a technology is hounded out of the academic circle by little mouthpieces of the industry. Their papers are withdrawn from the journals and they are publicly ridiculed by mainstream media that too is controlled by a handful of entities supporting the industry. Public opinion is manufactured through controlled media. This was considered corruption in public space and in science. Mainstream science in biotech, especially dealing with GMO and pesticide in our food, has itself become a pseudoscience and the scientific journals little more than propaganda. Science has now been so censored Science has not been so censored and scientists victimized since Copernicus thought sun might not be circling the earth and universe might not have our planet at its center. For me to have faith in science again, its research will have to be taken out of industry and political control. Scientists will have to get a free hand to research good and bad sides of everything, and their findings will have to stay within the main body of literature without witch hunting. Once that happens and 20 or 30 years pass, with enough unbiased and honest research material is available on both sides of an argument, I can begin to consider this science as anything more than voodoo. Till such time, I have less than 2 seconds to spare for today's pro-biotech mouthpieces that dare to tell me what is science or pseudoscience. Till then, Thierry Vrain is one that is, like Copernicus, daring to go against propaganda and speak the truth. Cheers, Tony Mitra. That produced two responses, one from a pro-GMO guy that was not even worth mentioning, and another pseudo-condescending one from Falta. I usually do not respond or engage to such rubbish, but I understood that controversy is the key to drawing attention of the public, so perhaps I could help Thierry out a little by poking another needle into Falta's balloon. Hence, here is what I posted for a second and the last time on that blog, or paper, or whatever it was. You are generous on your assessment of what Vrain does not understand. You are also liberal with your opinion that glyphosate in our diet is not at a biologically relevant level, which is an opinion and not a fact, and will not be a fact unless a third-party investigation is done on it on 1,000 people over 30 years using 100 scientists, none of them either employed or controlled by either industry or politicians. This is a typical industry speak or pro-poison peddling lobbies working directly for or indirectly for agrochemical industry. So I shall reciprocate the compliment. You, Mr. Falta, may be ignorant of the fact that glyphosate is a mimic of amino acid glycine, which is one of the basic building blocks of all life, and because it's a mimic that did not exist in natural world till man produced it synthetically, We of the animal kingdom have no natural protection or immunity from it, and that it is easily picked up by our biology thinking it is glycine, and because of that it can easily pass through all checkpoints such as the blood-brain barrier and get into our bone marrow, our organs, our brain, our chromosome and DNA. And because glyphosate does not behave same as glycine, it produces dangerous and unpredictable results wherever it happens to be at the time when compared to what a molecule of glycine would have done. You either have no clue or are deliberately willing to suppress the evidence that carbon-14 doped glyphosate molecules have been traced to arrive at all those organs and places by the same people that conducted its safety test for Monsanto back in the late 1970s before these files were delivered to EPA for approval of glyphosate, and that EPA approved it anyhow and has since kept these data sealed and out of reach of the American people, except for a handful of scientists that have managed to lay their hands on these. Forget Vrain. You are the one whose opinion is worth very little when it comes to glyphosate. That is my opinion. Pardon me if I do not take you seriously. Now, before I end this particular section, I would like to add a few points. I do not think it is really necessary to stand up to corporate shills such as this Falta guy. Why? Because I think standing up to shills or not standing up really makes no difference in the long run. I believe the change in government policy is not going to come from convincing shills or even convincing politicians. Change is going to happen if large number of citizens get active in pushing the government to the point where politicians become uncomfortable and unsure of keeping their seat in the next election. For that to happen, somehow a large number of non-committed or uncommitted people have to be convinced about the dangers of glyphosate. From the track record of what is going on in Canada for the past so many years, I see some small effects of raised awareness, but nowhere near what is needed to force the government to rethink agriculture, food security, food sovereignty, or protecting Canada from corporate takeovers. Perhaps one day, one way is to lead by example and start doing things that I could do within my own capacity. Perhaps that might encourage the next person to find a task that he or she could do and set an example that other friends and neighbors might take ideas from. In any case, yapping with pro-corporate lobbyists is a waste of time in my opinion. They are not there to be convinced. Their career or financial or other interests are already hardwired. Their main job is to keep you engaged in these exchanges and prevent you from doing anything constructive. But having said that, I hope I did add a drop of turmoil in the sea of controversy regarding Thierry's talk. It went very well in a packed audience according to a note I got from Thierry tonight. And that, my dear friends, is that.